Video is about oaks. They're large trees that have very hard and valuable lumber. They produce a huge amount of fruit, especially in years called mast years, when they all seem to mysteriously coordinate their activities and produce a maximum amount of acorns. This mast behavior sort of overwhelms all of the animals that would normally eat acorns, such that in an effort to compete with each other, they store some by burying them or tucking them away in hiding places. And this results in getting the oak trees planted in new areas. So it's an amazing adaptation. Oak trees are foundation species of upland forests in our area and in areas further south, like in the central Appalachians hardwood biome. They're especially important in southern Illinois. We'll start our identification with red oak, and what I want to emphasize is that I'm just going to teach you a group. There are over 600 species of oaks in the world, and well over 100 that are common in North America, and so it's hard to identify them. They also tend to hybridize with each other, so that one oak will look a lot like another, but there are some recognizable groups that can help you kind of understand the ecology and have a rough idea of what type of oak you're looking at. And the first is the red and black oak group, and our example species is the northern red oak. It's common in Illinois. The acorns are sort of average looking, a little almost circular or almost spherical with a short cap on top. The bark tends to be fairly dark in color. It sort of develops little vertical streaks as the tree gets older, and it's a beautiful looking tree. The foliage, the leaves have lobes that are pointed on the tips, and so that's the main identifying characteristic of red and black oaks, as opposed to white oaks, as we'll see in a moment. The other thing about those leaves is that on the tips of the leaves there are little bristles, which are hard to see, but if you get one close up, you can see that there's a tiny little hook or sharp point on the tip of each leaf. Red oak is also pretty beautiful for fall color. They turn anything from just the standard brown color to a brilliant red. That's the red oak. It's got pointed tips on the lobes of the leaves. Next major group of oaks are white oaks, and we'll learn a couple species of those in Illinois. The first one is the white oak, Quercus alba, and it can be recognized by the rounded lobes on the leaves. Those don't have little bristles or tips on the ends. Some other characteristics of white oak include sort of grayish or light colored bark. You can see that here. The bark tends to be a little bit more flaky and not quite as blocky or hard as that of a red or black oak. However, the wood is still high in quality, and it's prized for furniture and other uses. Another characteristic to look for with a white oak are the acorns, and for some reason nobody seems to be taking pictures of white oak acorns, but they're also just sort of smooth and fairly normal looking acorns like you have with the red oak. So they're not highly different. The cap is a little bit bigger typically on a white oak, and these acorns, from a wildlife perspective, are tasty and not quite as bitter as red and black oak acorns, and so a lot of animals will tend to eat them right away. And they also have a characteristic that they sprout or germinate right away in the fall, rather than waiting over the winter and then sprouting the following spring. So white oaks are a little bit different from red oaks in some of their ecological characteristics, but they're also a very important part of our forests in Illinois and surrounding states. Last oak that I wanted to show you is Bur Oak. And Bur Oak, at first glance, is kind of like red oak or white oak, because it does have rounded lobes on the leaves. It's in the white oak group, but the giveaway characteristic are the really crazy, hairy caps on the acorns. So Bur Oaks have really flamboyant, crazy looking acorns with caps that look sort of like, I don't know, a sort of hat that a certain kind of person might wear. Like a big, fluffy ski cap or something. The other aspect of Bur Oaks, they're often magnificent trees that grow out in the open, like in prairie areas or out in open fields and savannas. And if you look at the leaves, if you can't see any acorns to identify a Bur Oak, the leaves tend to be a little bit more kind of spatula shaped with a big end toward the tip that doesn't have as many lobes on it. So you can see the lobes are very deep towards the base of the leaf, and then towards the end of the leaf, the lobes usually are not as deep, and you get a bigger chunk of the leaf. So it's, I guess you could say, unevenly lobed compared to a white oak, where all the lobes are similar in size and shape. But that's just a usually kind of most of the time sort of thing, and it is important to check the acorns if you can. And often, even if a tree doesn't have acorns growing on it right at that moment, you can look around at the base of the tree and find an old acorn that will show you that you definitely have a Bur Oak. So those are the only 3 species that I'll ask you to identify in the quizzes. Bur Oaks have uneven lobes. White oaks have rounded but relatively even lobes. And red oaks and black oaks and others in that group have pointy tips with bristles. It's important to know that there are other oaks that don't fit this mode at all, and you have to kind of get to be a little more familiar with the feel of an oak. But if you look at this example, it's a shingle oak. You see that oaky bark. It's heavy. You have big root flare with roots that make it stable and strong. And the leaves themselves tend to be sort of shiny and sort of leathery, and that's another oak characteristic. If the leaves are tough and thick and sort of leathery, it's often an oak that you're looking at. But this shingle oak, it's pretty common in Illinois, and it doesn't have lobes at all. The leaves are what is called simple or entire. They aren't toothed, and they're not wavy. They're just smooth all the way around. Another oak that doesn't fit the pattern of having lobes is chinkapin oak, and that one just has smaller teeth. It's called dentate, all right, which is similar to a chestnut tree. Chestnut oak is another one that's like this. So, long story short, there's a lot of diversity in the oaks, but the ones that I want you to know are the red oak with the pointy tips, the white oak group with the rounded leaves, and the Bur Oak, which is one example of a white oak with uneven lobes and crazy acorns. And that is that for the oaks.